Coming up on the Children's Hour, we're going to explore wolves. We'll learn about their role as an apex predator and how conservation efforts are saving them from extinction. We meet documentary filmmaker Elka Dorr, who explains why wolves should live in the wild. Kids from the Extinction Diaries let us know about the red wolf's condition. We learn about the recovery of the Mexican gray wolf from John Oakleaf at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and from Tony Esparza at the Albuquerque Biopark Zoo, who cares for the wolves that will eventually be reintroduced into the wild. This is a howlin' good Children's Hour filled with great music. We're so glad you're with us. The Children's Hour is kids' public radio produced by the Children's Hour Incorporated. Find out more about us at childrenshour.org.
It's time for the Children's Hour, Kids Public Radio.
What did the wolf say when someone stepped on his foot?
I don't know. What?
Ow!
It's time for the Children's Hour, Kids Public Radio.
The wolf is a creature of beauty and grace, and part of the master plan. She eats other creatures, hangs out with her friends. I guess she's a whole lot like man. How for the wolf running free, how because it feels so good. How for the wild and wilderness, and how for the wolf in the wood. The wolf is a creature of storybook fame, with tales that were made to scare you. She's taken the bomb for eating grandmom. I tell you, it just isn't true.
It's just a fairy tale.
How for the wolf running free, how because it feels so good. How for the wild and wilderness, and how for the wolf in the woods. A creature of beauty and grace, but people have killed most her pack. It's time to keep the wild and wilderness. It's time to bring the wolf right back. How for the wolf running free, how because it feels so good. How for the wild and wilderness, and how for the wolf in the woods. How for the wolf running free, how because it feels so good. How for the wild and wilderness, and how for the wolf in the woods. How for the wolf in the woods. How for the wolf in the woods. How for the wolf in the woods.
You're listening to an encore edition of the Children's Hour that we recorded in 2020. From a CD called The Web of Life, that's the Walkin' Jim Stoltz with Howl for the Wolf. You're listening to the Children's Hour, and I'm so happy to be with you today. I'm Katie Stone, and with me on Zoom are a whole lot of kids. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Let's start over here. Who's with us?
Hi, it's Melissa.
Hi, it's Isaac.
Hello, Zen.
Hello, it's Amadeus.
Hi, it's Illuminata.
Hi, it's Daniel.
Well, you all, we are having a show today about wild wolves. They're furry, they're cute, but they're wild. What do you guys think of wolves?
I think they're great.
I think they're awesome.
Pretty cool.
They're amazing
Why do you think they're amazing, Illy?
because they have the kind of fur that they can take to be in the winter. And I think they're cool because they're also at Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah, we're going to be talking more about those wolves in Yellowstone National Park. Wolf reintroduction is happening on a global scale, and they never were completely made extinct. They're here in New Mexico, too. We have some wolves that have been reintroduced to the wild in southern New Mexico. I really love thinking about wolves because I love thinking about how dogs are related to wolves. And when I see my dog, sometimes I think about how, once upon a time you were wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're really cool because they have their own thing when they come together and they're all like,
They're like a little pack.
yeah.
They really are experts in teamwork. Maybe we have something to learn about teamwork and working together from wolves.
Yeah. And they also have a lot of power over the ecosystem.
Well, that's what's so fascinating. And our first guest, Elka Dur, is very interested in wolves in the wild, and she has a lot to say about exactly that. We're also going to be talking with John Oakleaf. He is from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and he's based in Albuquerque, but he works on the Mexican wolf program. In fact, he's the field projects coordinator for that program. And we'll learn from him about what's happening with the reintroduction of wolves into the wild across the United States. We'll also talk with someone from the zoo who's taking care of the wolves. But in the meantime, wolves appear over and over again in myth and legend and songs. And surely everyone on our crew has heard about crying wolf, which is pretending like something's really bad and saying, help, help. And you're just joking. Here's a song about that from the band Passenger. And this is the title track to their CD, The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Well, I am the boy who cried wolf, and I know I've lied in the past. But last night I saw his yellow eyes shining in the dark. Yeah, I know I spun tales with his voice, and I opened my mouth too fast. But last night I saw his footprints in the path. I could swim every sea from South Pole to North, but I know I'll only ever be the boy who cried wolf. Well, I am the shepherd's only son, and I know what a joke I've become. I've an honest heart, but I've lies on my tongue. I don't know how this started or where it came from. You have no reason and I have no proof, but this time I swear I'm telling the truth. I saw that old wolf from tail to tooth, and I know that he's hungry and he's coming down too. Well, I could swim every sea from South Pole to North, yeah, and I could climb every tree and scale every course. Well, I could tell only the truth from this day forth, but I know I'll only ever be the boy who cried wolf. Oh, oh, I am the boy who cried wolf. Oh, I am the boy who cried wolf.
You're listening to the Children's Hour, and today we're talking about wild wolves as opposed to pet wolves. And on the line with us is Elka Dur. She is an award-winning filmmaker, an animal communicator, an author, photographer, storyteller, lover of life, and the founder of the nonprofit Web of Life Foundation, or WOLF. Welcome to the Children's Hour, Elka.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Elka, we don't know a lot about wolves, and Illy has our very first question.
What are wolves?
Wolves are called the top predators or keystone predators. I don't know if you have an idea what a keystone is, but they used to build bridges in the Middle Ages that were kind of arched, and the keystone at the top, at the summit, which is kind of like a funnel-like stone, was holding it all together. So wolves are predators, meaning they're eating other animals, and keystone predators, meaning they're very, very important in the ecosystem. When the wolves come back, everybody else comes back as well. For example, in Yellowstone National Park, after a lengthy absence of wolves, they came back, and all the other animals came back as well, because they were eating all the elk and the deer, where they had many, many of them because nobody else was eating them before. And so they also started being more aware of the wolves, and they started moving around more. And so more vegetation started growing because they weren't eating everything, which meant more songbirds came in, and they were also driving away the coyotes. So there were more bunnies and more other animals. So the whole ecosystem changed in Yellowstone National Park when the wolves came back, and all the other animals came back as well. So they are very, very important players in the ecosystem, one might say. And they weren't only in North America, they were also all over Europe and the Northern Hemisphere. And they're coming back in certain areas to their old stomping grounds, so to speak.
What other kinds of keystone predators are there? Do they all work in a similar way to wolves?
Yes, they work in similar ways to wolves, and they're very important, eating the old, sick, and weak ones of a herd of deer and elk, for example, or taking out other little animals and evading diseases. Because where the wolves are gone, for example, there's more chronic wasting disease among the deer.
What's a chronic wasting disease?
It's a disease among deer when they are in one place together. See, the wolves, they are keeping the herds of deer and elk moving, because they always have to look over their shoulder and see if there's any wolves around, and they can't just hang around. And they break up in little bands, like, for example, the females and the does and their offspring, for example. They're never together in huge herds, but humans often put them in enclosures or put them together in huge herds for the hunters, and feeding them. And in those situations, when there aren't any wolves around, there is a lot of disease because they're giving it to each other. It's kind of like right now, we have to stay away from each other to not pass on the virus to each other. It's the same with the deer and elk. When there's too many of them and one of them is sick, and the wolves are not taking out the old, sick, and weak ones of a herd of deer and elk, then they'll pass it on to each other. And often a whole herd is compromised by that. We have found that in New Mexico as well, in northern New Mexico with an elk herd, for example.
What can you do to stop this disease?
The best way is to bring the wolves back, because they are the ones that can kill and eat a deer, for example, that is sick. They are the only ones, because they evolved that way. And when they were looking at wolf kills in Yellowstone National Park, they found that almost all of them were really sick. They had some kind of disease, or they had arthritis, or they were getting old. They were looking at the bone marrow of the animals that were taken down by the wolves, and they were all sick. So I would say allow the wolves to come back, and do not have huge herds of any kinds of animals in captivity, because that way they can pass it on to each other much more easily.
Are wolves a problem?
Well, it depends on whom you're talking to. Some people are calling them a problem, or saying that they are problem wolves. And usually what they're referring to is that wolves occasionally kill a livestock, let's say a calf or a cow or a sheep somewhere. And then they're being called problem wolves because in that instance, they are competing with us for our food because we are raising the herds of cattle and sheep for our food sources. So if a wolf takes one out, it can be that they're being called a problem wolf, especially if it happens a few times in a row. But I'm working with the wolf biologists and ranchers and farmers all over the Northern Hemisphere, basically in Europe as well, and here in the States and in Canada. In one instance, wolves had taken down a few cattle. And so they were looking at the cattle to see if they had been sick. They took the whole herd out and replaced it with a really healthy herd and put up a video camera. And the wolves, after the herd was really healthy, were seen walking by the herd and not even bothering the cattle at all, and going after the deer and elk instead. So that's very interesting.
Do you know why the wolves are going away, or what's happening to the wolves? What's making them go away, or what's happening to them?
Well, again, it's that old story that we thought wolves are our competition for food. They are eating our cattle and our sheep. We didn't think that we could coexist with wolves. So for the longest time, we killed them. And actually, when I was a child growing up in Germany, there were sometimes plaques in the forest saying, last wolf killed here, 1750. People were really proud of killing all the predators because they thought they were competition to them and their livelihood. And they didn't have a story where they could coexist with them because they felt like it's either cattle or wolves. We can't all coexist. That's what the prevalent story was. So people kept killing them. And then when the settlers came to this country, they did the very same thing. There were wolves all over the Northern Hemisphere, but we didn't want them here. So right away, when the settlers came, they started killing the wolves again. But right now, it's really hopeful because the wolves are gaining in the hearts of many people. And there's many people now that are not afraid of them anymore. And they're making a stand for the wolves. They're saying, we want them here on this planet with us. We need them here on this planet with us. Like we heard at the beginning, how important they are for the ecosystem. So actually, in some areas, they're coming back.
Wow, that's fascinating. Tell us an example of where that's happening.
When I was a child growing up in Germany, there weren't any wolves. There weren't any really large wild animals. They'd killed them all. And I was walking around with my grandpa, and we have a farm in Germany, and he was telling me the names of all the fields. And all of a sudden he said, and this here is called the wolf trap. And that was the most amazing and interesting moment for me, because I said, the wolves, where are the wolves? Where are they? And he said, oh, don't worry. This is where our ancestors killed the last wolves, so you and I would be safe. But I didn't feel safe with no wolves around. And I was really mad because nobody had asked me. They had just exterminated the wolves. So I said to Grandpa, I'll bring him back, Grandpa. I'll tell people that they're not really dangerous. And guess what? The wolves are actually coming back now to Germany because we had something where all the countries were between the eastern and the western part were really divided. People couldn't move across and animals couldn't move across either. But when all that went away, the animals came back and they're crossing the border now again. So we have over 100 wolves in Germany. So they're not just going away, they're also coming back. And a lot of places in Europe, they're coming back, actually. And a few states in the US, they're coming back.
Great story. You're listening to the Children's Hour. We're talking with Elke Duer. She is a filmmaker and wolf expert. And coming up on the show, we'll be talking with a wildlife biologist who is responsible for the reintroduction program of the Mexican gray wolf in the United States. And we'll talk with the zookeeper who cares for wolves that will ultimately be released into the wild.
You're listening to the Children's Hour, Kids Public Radio. We'll be right back.
The Children's Hour is produced by the Children's Hour Incorporated, an educational nonprofit based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're listener-supported at childrenshour.org. Support for the Children's Hour is provided by the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science, announcing Chocolate, the Exhibition, a multimedia science exhibit that engages the senses and traces the evolution of chocolate from a small bitter seed to the delicacy it is today. The exhibit runs through March 2023. More info at nmnaturalhistory.org. Support for the Children's Hour provided by Electric Playhouse, an immersive entertainment and events center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Playhouse is open. You can purchase tickets, learn about events, play, and other opportunities, including future locations and music shows at electricplayhouse.com.
I'm waiting for the moon to fill. Pace, I'm pacing. Sometimes it feels like time is standing still. The pull gets stronger as each day goes by. I feel the hunger to dance. On an ordinary day, I'm an ordinary person, but when the moon is full, I'm a dancing wolf in motion. Feel the moment coming soon when I howl to the moon.
Howl to the Moon is Lucy Kalantari and the Jazz Cats from her 2019 Grammy-nominated CD, All the Sounds. You're listening to the Children's Hour, and we've got a few more questions for Elke Duor. She is a wolf expert and a filmmaker, and she's with us today to talk about wolves.
Is there like a person who is like the most in charge of the whole pack?
Or a wolf person, I think she means.
Yeah, they used to call them the alpha male and female, but I call them the father and mother of the family, and I call them also a family. And so they're usually in charge because they are hunting together as a family. So they have to all be in line and everybody needs to do their job. So they have food and so nobody starves. It's usually the father and the mother that keeps them all in line. And even though they are working together like a wonderful family, usually, even so, half of the puppies dies in the first year from accidents, and maybe an eagle and other predators. They get killed by polar bears. Like an eagle can catch a little wolf or a bear, or they can get sick, or they can fall off a cliff, or maybe there's a snake bite or something. So they're usually losing half of their babies in the first year.
It's a dangerous life to be a wild wolf. Melissa has our last question for you.
What can I do to help about wolves?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so very much. I think awareness is the first step because a lot of people are still in that old myth of the big bad wolf that came about when we were starting to do our agriculture and where we were starting to raise cattle and sheep. All of a sudden, the wolves became our enemies. And we see that in the old stories, the Three Little Pigs and Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf is always the bad guy. So I would say, first of all, really inform yourself about who wolves really are and if they're really dangerous, because if we can write a new story of coexistence with the wolves and with other predators and other animals, then that fear will go away. That age-old fear of the big bad wolf will go away. Do as much research about wolves as possible. I did a documentary about the Mexican gray wolves, the most endangered land mammal in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's very important that people really inform themselves about the wolves, because there were still so many old stories when I was interviewing people. And what happened was, the children and young students, they would all come to me and say, I want to be in your film. I want to be interviewed because I want to tell the truth about wolves. For example, people still feel that wolves are killing humans, which is not the case. I have done a lot of research to do my documentary, and I also wrote a book about wolves called Wolves and Humans, a New Story of Coexistence. And these stories were never really true. I couldn't find one confirmed incidence of a healthy wolf killing a human in the US since they started keeping records. There were just some incidences of wolves having rabies and attacking people. But there was really no incidence of a wolf in the wild hurting and killing a human. So that is also very important that we know these things.
El Kaddour is a filmmaker and an enthusiastic lover of all things wild. You can learn a lot more about her and her work at weboflifefoundation.net. And if you'd like to learn more about wolves and how you can jump on board helping wolves recover from near extinction, you can go to wolf.org. The International Wolf Center has a lot of information and educational materials about these majestic carnivores. El Kaddour, thank you so much for being with us on the Children's Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor. I love to speak about wolves and dispel all these old myths.
Dispelling old myths is something we're good at on the Children's Hour. Coming up next on the show, we're going to be talking with John Oakleaf. He's the Field Projects Coordinator of the Mexican Wolf Program at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then we're going to have a little conversation with Tony Esparza. She's the Carnivore Supervisor at the Albuquerque Zoo, who is responsible for the wolves that are there. From a brand new CD, Never Mind the Blocks, here's Jumpin' Janie. This is Wolves right here on the Children's Hour.
change your point of view. Like the three little pigs and the fragile house of twigs. Some rumors they are spread from an angle that is skewed. Don't you run away when the wolves come out tonight. 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 We'll be howling at the moon, howling at the moon, howling at the moon tonight. Howling at the moon, howling at the moon, howling at the moon tonight. Howling at the moon, howling at the moon, howling at the moon tonight. Howling at the moon, howling at the moon, howling at the moon tonight.
Extinction Diaries. There are as few as 18 red wolves left in the wild. Their genetic makeup has been debated to this day, some believing the canine to be a coyote-wolf mixture and others believing them to be a distant third species. Because of this, the red wolf is sometimes excluded from endangered lists despite their horrifying numbers. Once thriving in almost all the eastern U.S., men eradicated them close to extinction when in 1974, 14 survivors were captured for a restoration project in South Carolina. In 1978, they were declared extinct in the wild, but by 1987, the captive population had reached 63, and 2 releases occurred back into North Carolina and Tennessee. Those populations rose to 120 by 2012. In a tragedy of leadership, U.S. Fish and Wildlife neglected to enforce protections and the population collapsed to 40 in 2019, then 20 a year later. The plight of the red wolf is a revelation of human awareness as stewards and our place in the web of life where the red wolf and man might end as equals. My name is Rising Moon. This is a Small World radio production.
The Extinction Diaries from KFOI in Redding and Red Bluff, California. And before that, Wolves by Jumping Jamie from their CD Never Mind the Blacks. Here comes Jumpin' Janie. You're listening to the Children's Hour, and we have with us on the line John Oakleaf. He is the Field Projects Coordinator for the Mexican Wolf Program at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Thank you so much for being with us on the Children's Hour. How many wolf reintroduction programs are there in the U.S. and Canada right now?
So I can think of 3, 4 that are ongoing, or completed. And so the active wolf reintroduction program, where you're actually putting wolves on the ground, there's the Mexican wolf program here in the Southwest. There's a red wolf program, which is in the Southeast, North Carolina kind of area. And then there's a active reintroduction that's going on Isle Royale, which is up in Michigan, where they're trying to recolonize some wolves on the island. And then there's the famous reintroduction programs that they aren't really putting wolves out anymore at, but that's Yellowstone and Idaho, which I've worked on for a little while.
When we talk about these programs, how many wolves are we talking about that are in these programs? I mean, how many do you put into the wild, and when do you know that you're successful?
For the Northern Rockies and for the Mexican wolves, we had recovery plans. And so recovery plans kind of give you a roadmap to when you're successful at your reintroductions. So for the Northern Rockies, they called for 10 breeding pairs in 3 populations scattered across the Northern Rockies to be successful. And so they did releases for 2 years, and then natural reproduction took over. And that caused most of the growth from there. It was a pretty quick reintroduction. Down here on the Mexican Wolf Project, we're calling for 320 wolves over 8 years. And then the Mexican wolves were almost gone, extinct from the wild. So we had to start with a captive breeding program that required to build up captive stock and then release them. And we're at about 160 today. And we're mainly focused not on growing the population with our releases, but improving the genetic stock. So there was 7 animals when we caught the last Mexican wolves.
7 wolves in total in the whole world. That's all that was left of the Mexican wolf?
So this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. At that time, the Endangered Species Act just came, 1974. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service sent out a trapper down to Mexico to trap some of the last remnant wolves. And he caught some wolves, and there was a few samples in captivity that were there that proved to be pure Mexican wolves. And so we had a founding stock of 7. And even the ones that he had caught down in Mexico, those wolves disappeared and were largely gone by the early 90s. They were gone. What happened from there is our zoos and our captive partners build up this population. So they build up 300 plus wolves today so that you could release wolves into the wild and still have the genetic stock in captivity where that wouldn't cause them to go extinct by the risks in the wild. We built from 7. That was a great success by our captive partners in the zoos, and built from 7 to 150. And in 98, we started releasing Mexican wolves into the wild. Today, we're focused on the genetics and getting more diversity out there, out in the wild. And so what we do is we put young pups, less than 10 days old from captivity, into wild dens. So we figure out where the wild wolf den is and put these young pups into wild dens. It's called cross fostering. And then those pups are raised by their pack and raised like wild wolves. And then they incorporate this different genetics into the population.
How do you convince local ranchers and farmers that it's okay to have wolves be reintroduced? Because it seems to me like maybe those are some of the people who would be the most resistant because they'd be worried that the wolves would maybe kill their sheep or cows.
Yeah, and I guess I don't try to convince them, because wolves are a lot about how you see the world. And so certain people see them as citizens of wilderness and kind of showing that it's a wild area and a wild place. And they very much appreciate the howl of a wolf in the wild. And then other people, they're more utilitarian, or out there on the landscape. They're actually working on that landscape and they make their living on that landscape. And so those folks tend to be more concerned about the presence of wolves, and they have to live with them, and there's economic impacts to their business. So what I do try to do is work with the ranchers. Our shared goal is none of us want depredations on livestock.
And what do you mean depredations?
So when wolves kill livestock, something that people own, it's considered a depredation, a taking of something that a person owns.
We're talking with John Oakleaf from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about wolves. He's the field projects coordinator for the Mexican Wolf Program. We're going to come right back and talk more with John Oakleaf right after a break. The Children's Hour radio show is an independent production of the Children's Hour Incorporated, a New Mexico nonprofit. Support for the Children's Hour provided by United Way of Central New Mexico. The Children's Hour is supported in part by an award from New Mexico Arts, a division of the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Support for the Children's Hour is also provided by the City of Albuquerque's Cultural Services Department and the Urban Enhancement Trust Fund. Support for the Children's Hour is provided by Token Ibis, a nonprofit making philanthropy accessible to everyone. To sign up, go to tokenibis.org. Welcome back to the Children's Hour. We are talking with John Oakleaf. He is the Field Projects Coordinator of the Mexican Wolf Program for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They are reintroducing the Mexican gray wolf to its original habitat in the Southwest. It's one of many programs that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has for wolf reintroduction around the United States. How many types of wolves are there?
Well, it depends on who you ask, but there's a thing where scientists often disagree. So there's splitters, people who split into different subspecies, and there's lumpers who kind of lump them together. And so the Mexican wolf is a subspecies, so it's kind of like a cousin of the gray wolf. It's Mexican gray wolf. So the Northern Rocky wolves are gray wolves as well. And they're bigger, they're morphologically different. They were brought down from Canada and reintroduced into that area. And then there's the Mexican wolves, which are the smallest subspecies. And then over in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that's a different subspecies of wolf. Timber wolf is what some people commonly call them. And so that's a different subspecies. And red wolves are a different species altogether. So they're a little more distantly related from the gray wolves that all those other areas are considered. And so red wolves are a different species, a little bigger differentiation that occurs there.
Are wolves in the wild likely to breed with people's dogs?
There has been a couple of instances where we've seen that, and we've removed the litter, and we monitor that all the time. So we're monitoring genetics of everything that we catch to look for wolf-looking dogs or dog-looking wolves. We don't want that to occur, and that's really, really rarely. The wolf-dog hybrids, a lot of times they end up being bad pets because they get to about a year old, and then they want to be dominant. And most of wolf dogs are from northern wolves. So they're from Alaska, crossed with the Alaska wolves, or places where wolves are allowed to be taken from the wild and crossed with dogs. Even the ones we see in the Southwest are never Mexican wolf dog crosses.
On that line, do wolves ever breed with coyotes?
So we have not seen any breeding with coyotes here in the Southwest or in the Northern Rockies. Now, if you go out east, there is some bigger coyotes that there is some integration of coyote genetics into wolf genetics or wolves.
Well, we've been speaking with John Oakleaf, and he is the Field Projects Coordinator for the Mexican Wolf Program at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I just want to thank you so much for being with us on the Children's Hour and helping us understand the Wolf Reintroduction Program. Thank you so much, John.
Well, thank you for your time, and I appreciate your listeners out there.
Wolf. A wolf is reading a book of fairy tales. The moon hangs over the forest, a lamp. He is not assuming a human position, say, cross-legged against a tree as he would in a cartoon. This is a real wolf, standing on all fours, his rich fur bristling in the night air, his head bent over the book open on the ground. He does not sit down, for the words would be too far away to be legible, and it is with difficulty that he turns each page with his nose and forepaws. When he finishes the last tale, he lies down in pine needles. He thinks about what he has read, the stories passing over his mind like the clouds crossing the moon. A zigzag of wind shakes down hazelnuts. The eyes of owls yellow in the branches. The wolf now paces restlessly in circles around the book until he is absorbed by the power of its narration, making him one of its illustrations, a small paper wolf, flat as print. Later that night, Lost in a town of pigs, he knocks over houses with his breath.
That was Johnny Whitehorse from Totemic Flute Chants with Wolf, and inserted in there Billy Collins with his poem, Wolf. You're listening to the Children's Hour. We're talking about wolves. We wanted to talk with one of the zookeepers at the Albuquerque Zoo who's taking care of the Mexican gray wolves that reside there. These are the wolves that get released into the wild. Tony Esparza is the carnivore supervisor at the ABQ Biopark. Welcome to the Children's Hour. Thanks for being with us. Tell us what's going on in the wolf den right now.
This is breeding season, so we've got 3 adult wolves right now. We've got the alpha male and an alpha female, and then they've got a cub that was born last year. And we're very excited because finally last year we got the okay to do some breeding. And so that's where Archer came from last year. So this year, we're hoping and crossing our fingers that we've got some pups in there somewhere. The thing about the Mexican gray wolf is that we really do want to stay away from them. What we want to do is try to recover their population in the wild. And to do that, we need them to not be used to people. So we're hoping that we'll be able to help with those efforts. So you never know. Sometimes, we'll have a pup born here, and then eventually he's going to get the okay to go back out into the wild and go out there and try to form his own pack. So it's exciting times around here.
You take care of other carnivores at the zoo as well. How are wolves different for you to care for than the other animals?
The Mexican gray wolves, they are from this area. So it's kind of an exciting thing to be involved with that. And so to know that there is a population here that is completely endangered. And I know we've got other animals that we take care of who are also endangered, but they're from other places. They're from Africa. They're from Australia and things like that. But these guys, they belong to us. So that's what kind of makes it really exciting, that we're part of trying to repopulate this part of the United States with this terrific species of wolf. And if you ever come by the zoo, you'll notice that their viewing windows are really small. And that is purposely made so that they're not used to hordes of people looking at them. Because once a wolf is released out in the wild, we want them to stay out in their wild. And we don't want them to run to people. We don't want them to feel that that's where we're getting food. So we want them to stay isolated. We want them to rely on seeking out their own food, not knowing that, okay, there's a person there. That person is going to directly feed me. So that's what makes it a little bit different taking care of the wolves than it would be taking care of a tiger.
Tony Esparza, you are the carnivore supervisor at the ABQ Biopark, the Albuquerque Zoo. Thank you so much for being with us on the Children's Hour.
Oh, you're welcome.
Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that.
There is something so exciting about the sound of wolves howling in the springtime, deep in the forest when the snow begins to thaw. It's the time when baby wolves are born and their mama feeds them and keeps them warm. And daddy runs to hunt for dinner.
These two parents work together 'cause they love their pups and love each other. They're the leaders of the pack. They howl and bark and their pack howls back. They have a way of knowing how to keep their family safe and growing. They are strong, they are wild, they guide their pack with a protective style. They're alpha wolves and they're the leaders of the pack.
Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that.
There is something so exciting about the sound of wolves howling in the summertime, deep in the forest when the wolf pups leave their den. And the members of the pack all work together to care for the pups in all kinds of weather. This is their time to learn and play, and Mama and Papa Wolf show the way 'cause they love their pups and love each other. They're the leaders of the pack. They howl and bark and their pack howls back. They have a way of knowing how to keep their family safe and growing. They are strong, they are wild, they guide their pack with a protective style. They're alpha wolves and they're the leaders of the pack.
Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that.
Wolves have family values just like you and me, and they work hard to keep their children healthy, safe, and free. And when I hear wolves howling, I know deep in my heart we must protect their habitat and keep them safe from harm. And Daddy runs to hunt for dinner. These two parents work together in spring, summer, fall, and winter. They're the leaders of the pack. They howl and bark and their pack howls back. They have a way of knowing how to keep their family safe and growing. They are strong, they are wild, they guide their pack with a protective style. They're alpha wolves and they're the leaders of the pack.
Leaders of the pack, howl about that.
They're alpha wolves and they're the leaders of the pack.
Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack, howl about that. Leaders of the pack.
Mighty wolf, mighty wolf, mighty wolf, 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 mighty wolf.
Running through the forest, what do I see? A mighty, mighty wolf and his family. 1, 2, and he makes 3. A mighty, mighty wolf and his family. A mighty, mighty wolf running wild and free. Mighty wolf.
You're listening to the Children's Hour. That was Jeff and Paige. Mighty Wolf is the name of that one. And Birdsong and the Eco Wonders was before that with Leaders of the Pack. You're listening to a show about wolves that we recorded back in 2020, so some of the numbers have changed and situations for some of the wolves. You can learn a lot more at childrenshour.org. Look for this episode, Wolves. You can also find a link to webcams at the Wolf Conservation Center there, where you can check out some wolves right now. We're going to go out with one more. This is a New Mexico band, the Rocking W Wranglers, with their version of Call of the Wild. I'm Katie Stone. We'll catch you next time for another edition of the Children's Hour.
the summer wind blows in something that grows into something you can't quite name. And you feel the pride you just can't hide, like a wolf never meant to be tame. It's a call of the wild. If the whippoorwill calls and thundering falls and rainbows to the sky, and you feel the thrill that sends up a chill when you hear the loba wolf cry. It's a call of the wild. When you feel the warm Santanas blowing, or see the crackling lightning break the sky. When you hear the raging rivers flowing, there's a love in the call of the wild that you can't deny. When you see a dewdrop sparkle like a diamond, when you hear a rippling stream, there's a time in the morning when the rustle of a new day wakes up the wonderland dream. And the call of the wild. When you feel the warm Santanas blowing, or see the crackling lightning break the sky. When you hear the raging rivers flowing, there's a love in the call of the wild that you can't deny. When you see a dewdrop sparkle like a diamond, when you hear a rippling stream, there's a time in the morning when the rustle of a new day wakes up the wonderland dream. And the call of the wild. Rippling, flowing, thundering, blowing, wonderland call of the wild.
The Children's Hour is an independent production of the Children's Hour Incorporated, a New Mexico nonprofit corporation.
Our show was written by Katie Stone, with help from all of us in the kids crew.
Find lots of information about us at childrenshour.org.
We want to thank our guests, Al Kadur from the Web of Life Foundation, John Oakley from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Tony Esparza from the Albuquerque Zoo.
Our podcast can be found wherever you get your podcasts, or at patreon.com/The Children's Hour.
Or ask your smart speaker to play the Children's Hour podcast.
We post our photos and more on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Find us at TCH Radio.
Our theme music is written by C.K. Barlow.
The Children's Hour is distributed by the Children's Hour Incorporated and the Public Radio Exchange, PRX, and the Pacifica Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to the Children's Hour, Kids Public Radio.